Isn't that beautiful? It's just beautiful. Ye'erav Na by Eitan Katz. Hag Sameach, my holy sisters and brothers. We're coming out of those 2 days, the first 2 days of Sukkot. And as we've been studying so often when we made our way through Tractate Sukkah, right? That first day in Israel is the full festival day. And then in Israel, they enter Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of the festival. Outside of Israel, the first 2 days are celebrated as the full festival because in ancient times, they couldn't be certain when the month had started. And then we maintain that tradition. So we are coming out of those first 2 days, the full festival days, which were like Shabbos, except that we could cook. And as we've been learning here in Tractate Beitzah, we could do other activities that are related to enjoyment of the festival and sort of related to cooking, right? So we could carry, even if it's not necessarily for the needs of food preparation, but we could carry in the neighborhood as long as it's related to rejoicing in the festival. And this really is the festival of rejoicing. It's actually called the Festival of Rejoicing. I was reading beautiful, beautiful introduction to the Sukkot Machzor, a book filled with everything that you need in terms of the daily prayers and rituals of Sukkot, and the introduction by Jonathan Sachs. And he says, this festival, Sukkot, to really understand it is to understand all of Judaism. We have a commandment to be besimcha, and we actually get that from the Torah, or one of the curses that Moshe said to the Jewish people there at the end of his life, and that's where we are in the yearly cycle of the Torah reading. And he said that one of the reasons that we'll be cursed, now he's talking to people that are about to enter the Promised Land, and they'll enjoy some time in the Promised Land in the full the full realization of that relationship between the Jews and God. But eventually the Jews would blow it, and later still we would blow it so bad that we would lose not just the first temple, but the second temple, and that terrible exile would begin that we are still living in. And one of the reasons for those curses is that we would lose our gratitude for all of the blessings that God had showered on us. And part of living in gratitude to God is you have to praise God, you have to thank God, but you also have to live besimcha. You have to serve God besimcha, with joy, right? If you can't find something to enjoy in this world, you're living it wrong. Right? And that's why we even find cases of people with extraordinary challenges to their health, to their livelihood, etc., and they still will find something to enjoy in this world. And if we're not, please God, suffering such terrible challenges, all the more we should be finding all kinds of blessings in our life to rejoice in. One last word before we get into tonight's pages. I feel a particular attachment to Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev. You followed me, and I went to his kever, his grave in the town of Berditchev in Ukraine during one of my visits to Uman. I was there with Moshe Storch in the middle of the night. We were singing the Berditchever Nigun. There's certain stories about the Berditchever Rebbe that I enjoy telling, and I told over Yom Kippur, and I told another one today, and I'll share that story that I told today. I'll actually share it tomorrow. But just a very small story that says so much about the Berditchever Rebbe. Right, so he lived in Berditchev, 200 years, more than 200 years ago. I think it was 1700s. And Berditchev then had tens of thousands of Jews, and he was their Rebbe. He was also known as a great advocate for the Jewish people in heaven. It's like his soul could ascend on Yom Kippur and advocate on behalf of the Jewish people and say, look, they have so many challenges. God, you got to go easy on them. They've already suffered so much. Give them a good year. Give them a year with less suffering than they've had before. And he really had a great, great love for his fellow Jews. The little anecdote that I read today Beautiful book translated, his book, the Kedushat Levi, his commentary on the Torah, translated by this man, not a rabbi, I believe, but his name is Munk, M-U-N-K. Or at least not a scholar, but he did this, passionate translation of the work, and it's beautiful. You can actually get that. It's a 3-volume set on Amazon. And at the end of this Torah commentary by the Berditchever Rebbe, there's some anecdotes about his life, and that's really special, the stories about him. It includes that story I've told before about his visit to Reb Baruch in Medjugorje. But this little story that I want to share now says that on one Yom Kippur, after all the praying was over, at the end of Yom Kippur, they had Nila, they had the shofar blowing, they came out of that very elevated spirituality that we enjoyed, just a week ago for Yom Kippur. And then he was surrounded by his followers, and the Berditchever Rebbe said to them, the time that I was allotted in this world before I as a soul entered this world, he had been given a time, right? In heaven, they decreed how many years he would have in the world. And his time was up. And he said, but I pleaded my own case in heaven. And I said I was angry with them after all the things that I had done, that I would be taken on Yom Kippur, nice as that sounds. But I want to, but Sukkah and Lulav, the commandments of Sukkah and Lulav, to dwell in the Sukkah, which, as we've discussed, it's amazing if you can sleep in it, but if you just drink wine or eat a meal that includes bread in the Sukkah, and then you say the blessing over dwelling in the Sukkah, so then you fulfill the obligation of Sukkah. One of the important mitzvahs, because like mikvah, it's a mitzvah that you do with your whole body. You're in the sukkah. You're fulfilling that obligation to be in the sukkah. And the other one is lulav, which we did yesterday and today as part of our morning prayers, right? The 4 species, the date palm, the willow branch, the myrtle branch, and the citron, the esrog, waving them in the 6 directions. And he said that these commandments are so special that I pleaded my case that I should be allowed to stay just a few days longer in this world so that I could fulfill the commandments of Sukkah and Lulav. And my request was granted. And so Sukkot came 5 days after Yom Kippur, and the Berditchever Rebbe led his people. And there are many stories, by the way. The one I'll tell you tomorrow is about the Berditchever Rebbe and his gabbai with regard to the esrog on Sukkot. But this time at the end of his life, so he got that extension on Yom Kippur, came Sukkot, he fulfilled the mitzvahs of Sukkah and Lulav, all the days of Sukkot. Sukkot ended, and the Berditchever Rebbe, his soul left this world. He died right after Sukkot. True story. The more we learn about the Berditchever Rebbe, the better. Let's light up the darkness. Where are we holding? Tonight we are covering 3 pages. We'll be doing highlights from pages 20, 21, and 22 here in Tractate Beitzah, the 8th volume of the Talmud. We are in chapter 2. This tractate is all about the laws of festivals. Here in chapter 2, what we're currently talking about in Mishna number 3, it's continuing differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Just like we had in chapter 1, there were differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel on an egg that was newly laid during the festival. And now they're talking about that they differ on certain kinds of offerings that could be brought when the temple was standing. And so Beis Shammai said, okay, we relax the laws, the prohibitions on labor that we would have on Shabbos on a festival with respect to food preparation so that we can rejoice in the festival. So what about an elevation offering? That's an offering brought in the temple, and no part of that offering is eaten by people, neither by priests nor by the owners of the offering. Rather, it completely goes up in smoke on the altar as a gift to God. Beis Shammai say such offerings cannot be brought during a festival. because no part is eating. And so if you're going to slaughter that animal during the festival, it was unnecessary with respect to food preparation since nobody's going to eat that food. But the law follows Beis Hillel, who say, yes, you can bring such offerings. Why? Because shall the table of our master, God, be empty when our table is full. However, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that offerings that are not related neither to the festival nor have a component where some of the offering is eaten, those may not be brought during the festival, specifically gift offerings and vow offerings. People could wait until it's not the full festival day to bring those offerings. We pick it up on the A side of page 20, about halfway down the page. Oh, and I'm sorry. I didn't welcome people who are here. Rebecca in LA, Randy in Florida, Pauline in Arkansas, Gwen in Michigan, Paul in the Great Northwest, Sue Strauss in the house from Chicago, Moisha in Brooklyn, Guy in Ohio, PK in Colorado. Gwen says it's been raining over there. And yes, Havdalah was just wine tonight. PK enjoyed the story. So glad you're all with us. Aoife from Ocala, Florida, and Gigi from the Great Northwest, I believe. British Columbia, right? Hag Sameach. Okay. Right. So we return to this dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about these offerings, right? Beis Shammai say you can't bring offerings that are offered up entirely on the altar. Beis Hillel say you can. Now, we've been talking about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the followers of Shammai and the followers of Hillel with respect to this question. Here's a story that involves Hillel himself, Hillel the Elder, who first set the tone for his followers, encountering not Shammai, but the followers of Shammai. So it's a bit of, running into the gang, the opposition gang without even their leader. So the sages taught in a Beitzah there was an incident involving Hillel the Elder, who brought his burnt offering to the temple courtyard in order to place his hands on the animal's head on a festival. He's bringing a burnt offering on a festival, right? Beis Shammai, and I guess they got it from Shammai, say you can't do that. Beis Hillel say you can do that, and here's Hillel himself bringing it. The students of Shammai the Elder gathered around him, right, and said to him, "What is the nature of this animal that you are bringing?" Now, this is elucidation from Rav Steinsaltz. This is the way he explains what happened. Hillel, being humble and meek, did not want to quarrel with them in the temple. And therefore, he concealed the truth from them for the sake of peace. He said to them, "It is a female, and I have brought it as a peace offering, as burnt offerings are always male. A burnt offering goes up entirely on the altar. A peace offering, some of it is eaten by the people who bring it. Therefore, definitely that's allowed on the festival since it's for the sake of food preparation. You're going to be able to slaughter it. You're also going to be able to put your hands on it, semicha, which Shammai and his followers would have said not permitted since not permit. That's like sort of rectifying the animal to prepare for bringing it as an offering. But you can't bring it as an offering according to them, only according to Hillel. So he's being meek, and for the sake of peace, he doesn't want to get into a dispute with the followers of Shammai right here in the temple courtyard. And that's probably the way that it was. You could also have an image in your head as like these guys are like, "Hey, where do you think you're going with that animal? Huh? Where are you going? Where do you think you're going with that?" Now, I don't think that they were really threatening with physical harm Hillel. But at any rate, they challenged him. And did he lie? Or did he just let them think the wrong thing? What does it say? They said, "Yeah, what is the nature of this animal?" He said to them, "It is a female, and I have brought it as a peace offering." That's not true. He brought a male. So for the sake of peace, he told a lie here. This is a very sad event. And he swung its tail for them so that they would not be able to properly discern whether the animal was male or female, and they departed. So it's like a little lie was told just so that they wouldn't have this confrontation in the temple courtyard. But such a shame that Hillel the Elder would be brought to tell this untruth for the sake of peace. Did he feel that uncomfortable? Were they really threatening such a big confrontation? Apparently. On that day, when the incident became known, suggesting that even Hillel had accepted Shammai's view, Beis Shammai gained the upper hand over Beis Hillel, and they sought to establish the halacha in this regard in accordance with their opinion. But, and here's the hero of the story, the unlikely hero of the story, a certain elder of the disciples of Shammai the elder was there, and Bava ben Buta was his name, who knew that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Beis Hillel in this matter. Right? He knew that even though he was one of the group that disagreed with the law, according to Beis Shammai, they cannot bring such an offering. According to Beis Hillel, you can, and the law is according to Beis Hillel. So this man who said, well, I don't believe that the law should be that way, but the law has been established that way. With the tremendous respect for the law and integrity, this man, Bava ben Buta, sent for and brought all the high-quality sheep of Kedar that were in Jerusalem, and he stood them in the temple courtyard, and he said, anyone who wishes to place his hands on the head of an animal should come and place his hands there. In other words, you can do semicha, you can bring these animals, the males, as burnt offerings. We don't hold that way, but the fact that my younger colleagues intimidated Hillel the Elder and made him scurry away, even telling a lie because he was afraid to have that confrontation in the temple precincts, that's a stain on us, the followers of Shammai. I'm not going to be a part of that, and I'm going to take specific action, and let me tell you, costly action to buy all those sheep. They were very expensive. These were the finest sheep, and he brought them to the court and made this public, very public statement to say, my colleagues were wrong and we're going to make up for it. And on that day, Beis Hillel, the followers of Hillel, gained the upper hand over Beis Shammai, and they established the law in this case in accordance with their opinion, and there was no one there who disputed the matter in any way. Amazing story. And sometime later, there was another incident involving a certain disciple from among the disciples of Beis Hillel who brought his burnt offering to the temple courtyard in order to place his hands on the animal's head on a festival. A certain disciple from among the disciples of Beis Shammai found him and said to him, what is this placing of hands? Why do you place your hands on the animal's head and thereby violate the statement of Beis Shammai? And he said to him, what is this silence? Why do you not stay silent, as the law was not established in accordance with their opinion? Was the law established according to your opinion? No. And he silenced him with a rebuke, and he, Beis Shammai's disciple, departed quietly. Right? The followers of Shammai didn't like that they lost, that the law had been established according to Hillel and Beis Hillel. And they kept kind of, trying to get it changed, kept rebuking the other, kept arguing against it. Abaye said, therefore it is clear from here that a Torah scholar whose colleague says something reprimanding or insulting to him should not answer back with something more than his colleague had said to him, to avoid adding fuel to the fire. As in the above story, the second story, the one said to the other, what is this placing of hands? And the latter responded to the former using the same language. What is this silence? The importance of civility. Especially in this case, well, you know what? You have won already. You've already won. This guy's coming to you to be rude, right? He wishes the law were his way. He's going to keep challenging you because he thinks you're wrong. He thinks your system is wrong. He thinks your colleagues are wrong. And he wants to keep ba. And you could say something insulting to him like, hey, you lost, get lost, right? But you don't. You must prize the ways of peace and of civility, particularly in speaking with people who passionately disagree with you and not escalate that conflict. Keep to reason, keep to rationality, keep to the facts. Advocate, certainly, keep to the points of the argument. Don't escalate to become something and angry and a feud and things that will, break the community apart. We skip forward because we're doing 3 pages tonight. We're on the A side of page 21. Rav Avia the Elder raised the following dilemma before Rav Huna. If an animal is owned in partnership, half of it belonging to a Gentile, a non-Jew, and half of it to a Jew, what is the law with regard to slaughtering it on a festival? Right. So the concept is you can slaughter an animal on a festival, just like you can kindle a fire on a festival, things that you cannot do on Shabbos. You can do them on a festival because it's related to preparing food that you or another Jew is going to eat. If an animal belongs entirely to a non-Jew, right, and it's going to be for him to eat it, so a Jew can't slaughter that animal on a festival because the Jew is not going to eat it. Right? That's the idea. That's why we're distinguishing between non-Jew and a Jew. You can't violate the prohibitions of doing work on a festival unless it's to help you rejoice in the festival. You can't do it for somebody who is not obligated in the laws of the festival. So you can't slaughter an animal that belongs to a non-Jew. You can slaughter an animal that belongs to a Jew, assuming that the slaughter is for the purpose of food preparation. So here's the example of what is the animal is co-owned by a Jew and a non-Jew. Rav Huna said to Rav Avia the Elder, who asked the question, Rav Huna said, it is permitted. Rav Avia said to him, so what is the difference between this case and that of vow offerings and gift offerings, which are not permitted, right? Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree that those offerings are not permitted because they go up on the altar, and they're not related to the festival. They could have been brought some other time, and nobody's going to eat any of them, so that cannot be brought. But now Rav Avi is making an interesting argument. He says, well, vow offerings and gift offerings, which go up entirely on the altar and are not related to the festival, but they are similar to jointly owned animals, as part of the animal is sacrificed on the altar, while the other part is eaten by the owner and the priest. So there is eating, but it's not related to the festival. I guess I was confused. Why then is it not similarly permitted to slaughter them on a festival? I'm confused because peace offerings have that quality, but vow offerings and gift offerings are something else. Okay. Why then? I think they're just not related to the festival. It could have been done on another day. Okay. Why then is it not similarly permitted to slaughter them on a festival? Seeking to distract Rav Avia so that he need not answer this question, Rav Huna said to him, look, a raven flies in the sky. Like the question was like, it made sense. It would need some careful reasoning to answer it. And Rav Huna was like, he was just not prepared. He didn't have his arguments in hand. Just like I was confused, he was confused. Or maybe he knew the argument was going to take a long time. He was in a hurry to go celebrate. And he's like, look at the raven. And while Rav Avi was looking at the raven, Rav Huna was like, see ya, and left. When Rav Avia left, Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, said to his father, was this not Rav Avia the Elder, whom the master would recommend to us, saying that he is a great man? If so, why did you treat him in that manner and evade his question? And Rav Huna said to him, what should I have done for him? Today I am in a state best described by the verse, let me lean against the stout trunks, let me couch among the apple trees, from the Song of Songs. Meaning, I am worn out and exhausted from all the communal responsibility that has fallen upon me. And he asked me about something that requires reasoning and careful examination, and therefore I could not provide an immediate answer. And the Gemara asks, and what then is the reason? Why doesn't this work out? Right? If you can slaughter an animal, right, that you can only eat part of it, part is going to go to the non-Jew who's not obligated in the festival, part's going to go to the Jew who's going to eat it on the festival, and you can slaughter the whole animal, as it were. I mean, you can't slaughter half an animal, right? You're slaughtering the animal. So why doesn't it work that for these gift and vow offerings that the people eat some of it and the altar eats some of it? It's like, why doesn't that work? We're going to eat part of it, right? I guess the difference is between the burnt offerings entirely up on the altar, peace offerings are mostly eaten by the people, and I guess these gift and vow offerings, it's a small part that's eaten by the owner. Okay. And the Gemara asks, and what then is the reason? And the Gemara explains the difference between a jointly owned animal and a vow offering or a gift offering. A jointly owned animal, half of which belongs to a Gentile and half to a Jew, may be slaughtered on a festival, as it is impossible to obtain an olive bulk of meat without slaughtering. If a Jew wishes to eat even a small portion of meat, he has no alternative but to slaughter an entire animal, even though he will not use all of it. Therefore, it does not matter if part of the animal belongs to a Gentile. However, it is prohibited to slaughter vow offerings and gift offerings on a festival, because in this case, there is no real joint ownership of the animal, as the priests, when they receive their portions of the meat of the offering, and similarly, when Israelites partake of the offerings, they receive their portions from the table of the Most High. In other words, the entire offering belongs to God, and those who partake of it are considered guests at his table. And as stated above, one may not slaughter an animal on a festival for the sake of God. But you can. So this must be according to the view of Beis Shammai, right? According to Beis Shammai, you cannot do that because we know that Beis Hillel permit olah, right? An olah offering, a burnt offering. It's these other kinds of offerings that are now in question. All right, we skip forward. Near the bottom of the A side of 21, they raised a dilemma before Rav Huna, the same Rav Huna, with regard to Jewish residents of a village upon whom the authorities imposed the obligation to supply flour and bread to the Gentile military troops serving in the area. What is the law with regard to baking it on a festival? And Rav Huna said to them, we examine the matter. If those villagers can give bread from the soldiers' quota to a child, and the soldiers are not particular about it, then each and every one of the loaves is fit for a Jewish child, and therefore it is permitted to bake them. But if the soldiers do not allow anyone to partake of their bread, it is prohibited to bake the loaves for them on a festival. Now, if the soldiers say, bake loaves for us or we're going to kill you, okay, so now life is in danger. That's going to be a different answer. But the point is, you can bake bread on a festival for a Jew to eat on the festival so that he can fulfill the mitzvah, the obligation to rejoice in the festival by eating the foods of the festival. You can't bake bread for non-Jews to eat. This came up for sure as a practical matter because there were Roman soldiers stationed in this Jewish village and they said, bake for us. Right? And so what they said is, well, try to make it so when you're baking all this bread for the soldiers, some of the bread that you're baking is going to go at least to a child, even a small amount, so that he can enjoy the festival. And now all of that baking falls under, the law of you're baking for a Jew to enjoy the festival. Now, the Gemara challenges Rav Huna's lenient ruling. But isn't it taught in a Beitzah, there was an incident involving Shimon the Timnite, who did not come on the night of the festival to the study hall. In the morning, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava found him and said to him, why did you not come last night to the study hall? And he said to him, a military unit on a search mission came to our city and wanted to pillage the entire city. So we slaughtered a calf in order to placate them, and we fed them with it and had them depart in peace. Now Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava said to him, I wonder if your gain, that which you saved by preventing the soldiers from taking your possessions, was not outweighed by your loss, the punishment for your desecration of the festival. As the Torah states, only that which every soul must eat, that alone may be done for you. Only that which every soul must eat. Who's must eat on the festival? The Jews were commanded to rejoice in the festival, which indicates that food may be prepared for you, but not for Gentiles. And the Gemara asks, but why did Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava say this? Wasn't some portion of the calf fit to be eaten by them? The conclusion seems to be that even if a Jew may eat from an animal, it may not be slaughtered on a festival for the sake of a Gentile. Right? Where am I? Where's the law? Here, food for Gentile military troops. If a Gentile, this is what the law actually came out to. If a Gentile military company ordered Jews to bake them bread on a festival while with the Jews' flour, It is permitted to do so, provided that the Gentiles would not mind if the Jews offered some of the bread to a child, in accordance with the opinion of Rav Huna. So it's not this very strict opinion of Yehuda ben Bava. Now, Rav Yosef said, yeah, but in that case, it was a calf with a condition that would cause it to die within 12 months. It was a treifa, so the Jews could not eat from that calf. So it may not be, right, so the Gemara challenges, but wasn't it still fit to be eaten by dogs? And it could be argued that it was slaughtered for the sake of the dogs belonging to Jews. In other words, you can actually feed your own animals on the festival, right? Because that helps the Jews rejoice in the festival. They're not comparing non-Jews to dogs. They're just saying you have no obligation to feed. The Torah doesn't say feed non-Jews on the festival. The Torah does say take care of your animals. It says that elsewhere. But if you are rejoicing, your animals should not be starving. That's actually a teaching that we've seen elsewhere, right? So when you're rejoicing on the festival, you do have to make sure that all of your livestock, all the animals that depend on you for their sustenance, just like your children, are fed. Right? So even though this calf was a treifa that Jews themselves couldn't eat, it's not a kosher animal because of this damage that the calf had undergone. Like, for instance, if its lung was punctured, then it's an unkosher animal. They can't eat it. But their livestock, their dogs or whatever, could eat it. And the Gemara answers, the question of whether or not one may perform prohibited labor on a festival for the sake of dogs is actually a dispute between Tanaim. As it is taught in a Baraisa, it is written, only that which every soul must eat, that alone may be done for you. By inference from that which is stated, every soul, I might derive that even the soul of an animal is included, similar to that which is stated, and he that kills the soul of an animal shall pay it. The word nefesh, which we use to regard to a human soul, also is used to apply to an animal soul. Of course, animals have souls. The word neshama, which also is used to apply to the human soul, does not apply to the animal soul, but we and animals share that we have a nefesh, right? That's that living energy of the soul. Therefore, the verse states and emphasizes for you, indicating for you, but not for your dogs. This is the statement of Rabbi Yosei HaGalili. Rabbi Akiva says, when the verse states every soul, it comes to teach that even the soul of an animal is included. If so, what is the meaning when the verse states for you? It means for you, but not for Gentiles. For you and those who depend on you who are obligated in the festival, but not for people who are not obligated in the festival, right? They are not obligated in the festival. It's a Jewish law for Jews that you have to celebrate Sukkot or Shavuos or Passover. And the Gemara asks, and what did you see that led you to include the dogs among those on whose behalf one is permitted to perform a labor on a festival, but to exclude non-Jews? And the Gemara explains, I include dogs because the responsibility for their sustenance is incumbent upon you, as one is obligated to feed the animals in his possession. And I exclude non-Jews because the responsibility for their sustenance is not incumbent on you. Skip a little more. And the ruling of Rav Huna that one is permitted to bake for Gentiles on a festival if they allow a Jew to eat of the bread differs from the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. As Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, one may invite a Gentile for a meal on Shabbos, as he will certainly not cook for him on Shabbos, and it is permitted to give a Gentile food that was prepared a day before. But one may not invite a Gentile for a meal on a festival. This is prohibited as a preventive measure, lest he come to cook more for the Gentiles' sake. And this indicates that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi holds that one may not prepare more for a Gentile, even if the meal is primarily meant for Jews. So think about what this has come up before, this question. So can you invite Gentiles to your Shabbos table? Yes. Can you invite Gentiles to your festival table? No. What's the difference? Shabbos is actually a more important holiday than the festival, right? And the priority of holidays, Shabbos comes first. So why is it that you can invite the non-Jew to your Shabbos table, but not to the festival table? Because on Shabbos, you're not going to cook anyway. Everybody knows no cooking is allowed. You cooked before Shabbos started, and then everyone is welcome to eat from what you already cooked. But on a festival, you're cooking during the festival. And if part of that cooking, right, if somehow, if you only cook what you cooked and then a Gentile comes over, absolutely, he can eat at your table, but you shouldn't invite him because everybody might eat what you prepared and there might not be enough food or something might have got ruined. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I'll whip something up. And now you're doing new cooking on the festival, and some of that cooking is for the Gentile at your table. And we're not permitted to violate the prohibition on cooking for people who are not obligated in the festival. And that's why Gentiles welcome at a Jew's table for Shabbos, but you shouldn't invite for the festival. Then we have the law later here. But if they come to you, you didn't invite them, but they come over, of course, sit down, eat. But you have to be very careful not to cook any additional food. They should only eat what's on the table that everybody is sharing already. You shouldn't cook new food because you can't, overcome that prohibition on cooking for someone not obligated in the festival. We continue to Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 2. Beis Shammai say a person may not heat water on a festival in order to wash his feet unless it is also fit for drinking, as they hold that kindling a fire on a festival is permitted only for the sake of preparing food, but not for washing. But Beis Hillel permit one to kindle a fire on a festival even for washing. A person may kindle a large fire and warm himself at it, right? So later we'll see, so you can wash yourself on a festival, but you can't warm water to immerse your whole body in it. You don't go into a heated pool. You shouldn't take a bath, but you can wash yourself on a festival, and you can even heat water to do that washing, and you can even make a fire so that you shouldn't be cold. It makes sense. Again, so you can rejoice on the festival. You're sitting there shivering or filthy. That's going to impact your rejoicing on the festival. And that actually is all we're going to talk about Mishnah number 4. Now because very short Gemara. Now Mishnah number 5. Rabban Gamliel was stringent, and where are we? We're at the bottom of page 21, B-side. Rabban Gamliel was stringent about 3 things in accordance with the statement of Beis Shammai. One, okay, so Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, right, the leader in his generation, we all acknowledge that in almost everything we follow, the law follows Beis Hillel. But Rabban Gamliel, with his own household, okay, was actually stringent on a few matters, 3 matters that are listed here, and he would actually follow that more stringent opinion with Beis Shammai. Now, he's the leader, he's the Nasi. He has the power to tell the public what they can and can't do, but he doesn't. He says the law follows Hillel, the public follows Hillel. For our own home, we're a little bit more stringent and we follow Beis Shammai in 3 matters. And what were they? One may not insulate hot food on a festival for Shabbos, right? So you can't put insulation on something that is hot this is like a festival that falls on a Friday, and you cooked some food, and now you're going to insulate that food so it stays hot on Shabbos, ab initio. But rather, one ought to do so on Erev Chag, before the festival starts, on the eve of the festival. And one may not set up a metal candelabrum that fell on a festival, and one may not bake thick loaves on a festival, but only thin ones due to the great effort entailed in preparing the former. And Rabban Gamliel said, from the days of my father's household, they would never bake thick loaves on a festival, but only thin ones. And the sages said to him, what shall we do for your father's household, who are stringent with themselves, but lenient with all the Jewish people, to allow them to bake thick loaves and cakes baked on coals, right? And the explanation of this is, okay, so, what are we going to say to you? You're just being stringent in your own house. You can do that, as long as you didn't issue a ruling that violates the law, which is that more lenient ruling of Beis Hillel in terms of what the public can do. And so that's how it worked out. Skip down a little bit. The Mishnah states that one of the 3 stringencies that Rabban Gamliel practiced in accordance with Beis Shammai, now we're on the A side of page 22, one of the 3 stringencies in accordance with Beis Shammai, practice in the house of Rabban Gamliel, was that on a festival, one may not set up a candelabrum that fell. We encountered this, I think, in Tractate Eruvin. So these were sort of tall candlesticks, tall, like like a standing lamp, maybe 5-6 feet high, with a light on top of it. And they were sort of like, you can imagine, from IKEA. They actually came in pieces. You could disassemble them and reassemble them. So what's happening here? So when it fell down, the pieces came apart. It didn't break. It just disassembled, right? The modular pieces that fit into each other, when it fell, they fell apart. Can you put that back together after it fell down? And Rabban Gamliel followed Beis Shammai in this and said, we may not set up a candelabrum that fell. And the Gemara asks, what prohibited act does one perform when he sets a candelabrum upright? And Rav Chananah bar Bizna said, here we're dealing with a candelabrum composed of segments, right? It was initially worded, you can't set it back up. Like, it fell down, you can't pick it up. They're like, well, of course you can pick it up. And so this guy explains, no, it fell apart when it fell down, and you can't reassemble it. So here we're dealing with a candelabrum composed of segments that fell apart, and it is prohibited to reassemble such a candelabrum because it looks like building. That's the prohibited labor on Shabbos and festivals of building. As Beis Shammai hold that there is a prohibition against building with regard to vessels, utensils, and therefore the pieces of this candelabrum may not be reconnected. Whereas Beis Hillel hold that there is no prohibition against building with regard to vessels, and there is also no prohibition against dismantling with regard to vessels. One may therefore reattach the pieces of the candelabrum if they came apart. I was so glad when I read this preparing for this class, because I was unsure of this law in a situation that happened to me a few weeks ago at our little backyard minyan. I'm the gabbai, so I often get there early and help set up the tables. They're folding tables. We can unfold the table and stand it up on Shabbos. You can do that. When I was doing that, the legs of one of those tables sort of like came off the rod that holds it in place under the plastic table. And I wasn't sure if I could sort of reattach those legs. It didn't break, it just disassembled, exactly like we're talking about here. And I was a little unsure. I was like, is that going to be repairing? I'm not sure. I'll just put this table aside. We'll use other tables. But now we see here, that table is a utensil, like a vessel, the same thing. And I could have reassembled it according to Beis Hillel, and that is the law. And the Gemara relates that Ula once happened to come to the house of Rav Yehuda on a festival, and Ula's servant stood and tilted the oil lamp, diverting most of the oil to one side, with the intention of preventing the oil from reaching the wick so that the light would be extinguished more quickly. Rav Yehuda raised an objection to Ula from the following Beitzah, in which it is taught one who adds oil to a lamp on Shabbos is liable for performing the prohibited labor of kindling on Shabbos, and one who supplies himself with oil from a lit lamp on Shabbos, right? If you have an oil lamp and you remove some of the oil from that lamp, like to put in your salad dressing, for example, now you've reduced the amount of oil in that oil lamp. That oil lamp will therefore burn out earlier on Shabbos than it would have otherwise, and you actually become liable for performing the prohibited labor of extinguishing a flame because you made it go out earlier than it would have on its own with the oil that was put in there before Shabbos began. This indicates that any action, even an indirect one that causes a lamp to be extinguished earlier than it would have otherwise, is considered extinguishing. Here too, by tilting the lamp, the servant extinguished a light on the festival, which is prohibited. And Ula said to him, you are indeed correct. The act was performed by my servant without my knowledge. With regard to the law governing extinguishing on a festival, Rav said, it is permitted to trim the end of a wick that has become charcoal, that light's already out, so that it will burn better, and this is not considered extinguishing. With regard to the same issue, Abba Bar Matra raised a dilemma before Abaye. What is the law with regard to extinguishing a lamp that is burning in a room on a festival for another matter? This is a euphemism for marital relations. We are instructed by our sages that when having marital relations, it should be in the dark. So if you have a light burning on a festival and now you want to rejoice in the festival by husband and wife doing what they do, can they put out the lamp? Answer. Abaye said to him, one may not extinguish it, as it is possible to have relations in a different room. Well, Abba Bar Marta continued, well, if he does not have a different room, they live in a studio apartment, so what should he do? And Abaye replied, well, it is possible to erect for oneself a partition out of sheets and engage in relations on the other side of the partition. Abba Bar Marta asked further, if he does not have sheets to erect a partition, what should he do? Abaye answered, well, it is possible to invert a vessel over the lamp in order to hide the light. And Abaye Bar Marta further inquired, well, if he does not have a vessel, what should he do? And Abaye said to him, it is prohibited. One may not extinguish the lamp. What is the law? Extinguishing on a festival. It is prohibited to extinguish a fire on a festival, even if one's house is burning, unless the blaze is life-threatening. And as we've seen elsewhere, the sages are lenient about that. Like if your house is actually burning, right, because this was a later addition to the law, because it would endanger all the Jews if one Jew's burning house caused other houses in the neighborhood to burn, and then the enmity of the people would be directed at the Jews, and then their lives would be threatened. So that's why you could put out a fire, even if the fire was not immediately life-threatening. But the original law is, unless it's life-threatening, you can't extinguish a fire. One may not, but if there's any danger that it could become life-threatening, there you go. So one may not extinguish a fire, even if his house or his pot is filling with smoke, for any other purpose. Some hold that if the fire will affect the preparation of food, for example, it will render his vessels unfit for cooking, or if it will burn down his house along with all his food, then he may extinguish it. The law is in accordance with the opinions of Abaye and Rabbah, right? So for making love, no, you can't put out the fire. You just have to somehow shield yourself from the fire. We go to the B side of page 22. I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, please get them in. Mishnah number 6. Rabban Gamliel also said 3 things as leniencies in opposition to the view of most of the sages, right? So in 3 areas, Rabban Gamliel, for his own household, I guess, was more lenient than the general law. One may sweep the room of the couches on a festival, i.e. the dining room, where they would recline on couches to eat, as there is no concern that by sweeping the room, one might come to fill in the holes and level the ground. Now, this is much more relevant in the ancient world where they typically had dirt floors. If you have a wood or a stone floor, this is no concern. You can certainly sweep the room so that it won't be gross and you can enjoy the festival better. The problem with a dirt floor is that if you sweep it and there are like little indentations and furrows in the floor and now you fill them, that is like construction filling in holes, and that's why that's a prohibited labor. And another leniency of the house of Rabban Gamliel, and one may place incense consisting of fragrant herbs or burning coals in order to perfume one's house on a festival. And one may prepare a whole kid goat, meaning a kid goat roasted whole with its entrails over its head on the night of Passover, as was the custom when they roasted the Paschal lamb in the days that the temple was standing. However, the rabbis prohibit all 3 practices. It is prohibited to sweep lest one come to level the ground. It is prohibited to burn incense because it does not meet the criteria of permitted food preparation, nor is it really necessary for the needs of the festival. And it is prohibited to eat a goat that was roasted whole on the night of Passover because it would appear as if he was eating consecrated food outside the temple. Right? The Paschal lamb could only be eaten in the proper manner when the temple was standing. When he consecrated it, had a group of people registered to eat it. It was slaughtered in the temple precincts and then brought out of the temple, and then it was roasted whole. And then once the temple was destroyed, the sages said, you can eat lamb on Passover, but you can't roast a whole lamb in the style that it was done when the temple was standing. The Gemara, Rav Asi said, the dispute with regard to the incense applies only to a case where one wishes to burn the incense in order to perfume his garments. However, if he burns the incense in order to enjoy the smell, all agree that this is like other bodily pleasures, the satisfaction of which has the same status as food preparation, and it is therefore permitted. What is the actual law on this? Burning incense on a festival or on Shabbos. One may not sprinkle aromatic powder or wood on coals on a festival, whether his intention is to fill his house with a pleasant fragrance or to perfume his clothes, in accordance with the opinions of the rabbis, as explained by Rav Asi. However, one may smoke fruit with incense in order to enhance its aroma. One may also fill a vessel with fragrant smoke before a festival, plug its holes, and then open them on the following day, even on Shabbos, in order to perfume the house. It's just a bunch of smoke from the day before. Now you release it, makes a nice smell. And some prohibit smoking tobacco on a festival based on the prohibition to burn incense. Many authorities, however, permit smoking tobacco on a festival. And the custom in most places is to be lenient, although there are those who are stringent for a variety of reasons. And with regard to sweeping the house, if you have a wood or stone floor, that is permitted on Shabbos or a festival. Okay, let's go to your questions and comments. Yosef, what if a Roman demands to slaughter an unkosher animal? How would that scenario be handled? Right, so, the bottom line is you're prohibited to do that. If he threatens your life, and it's just to feed him, I'm not a rabbi, but I think you're allowed to do that. You're definitely going to be allowed to do that to save your life. If he says slaughter that animal so that we can offer it up to Zeus or some other idolatrous being, okay, then it's a really tough question, right? And some would say then you're obligated to say no, even though you might die. Others say you're permitted to say no, even though you're risking your life. Sharon, but it is my understanding that Sukkot is universal to members of all nations. Why is it that it is being taught here we cannot invite non-Jews to this festival? No, you can't cook for non-Jews, right? You can't cook for non-Jews. We could bring, but the question maybe you're asking is, could we bring offerings for non-Jews on Sukkot? Right? Could we slaughter animals in the temple on their behalf? I'm not sure about that. It is interpreted that the 70 bulls that are slaughtered over the course of Sukkot represent the 70 nations, and so we're sort of bringing these offerings on behalf of the whole world. The 70 nations include Israel, right? That's one of the 70 nations. So that is sort of like co-owned, right, by Jew and non-Jew. That's okay. But what you can't do, right, is cook for somebody who's not obligated in the festival. It's not some kind of, like racism or bigotry against non-Jews. It's just saying you're only allowed to violate the prohibition, all the 39 malachas, the 39 categories of prohibited labor on Shabbos are also prohibited on the festival, except that you can cook food so that you can rejoice in the festival, and then what's related to cooking food. But you can only do that for people that are obligated to eat that food on the festival. And the non-Jew is not obligated to eat that food on the festival, so the Jew is not permitted to violate that prohibition on behalf of the non-Jew. That's about as good as I can explain it. Maybe somebody can do a better job. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, for page 23. May this festival, which is a universal festival, right? And we look forward, like today's Torah portion was, a Haftorah portion was from yesterday and today was from Zechariah, right? Where it's the end of Aleinu, where we look forward to the day when everybody worships the same God, worships God, and on that day, not only will God be one, but God's name shall be one, meaning we'll all have the same experience of God, and all of us, everyone in the world, call God by the same name. That's the Haftorah of Sukkot, because it's such a universal holiday. Hag Sameach.